Welcome to Southbank Centre's book podcast, where you'll hear us in conversation with the people shaping arts and culture today.
If you want to hear from some of the biggest and most influential names in contemporary literature, then you're in the right place.
In the latest episode of the podcast, we're going to feature highlights from another great event from Southbank Centre's London Literature Festival 2019 for your listening pleasure. Just to let you know, there may be some strong language and sexual references. Good evening, and welcome to Southbank Centre's Queen Elizabeth Hall. I'm Debo Amon, Literature Programmer here at Southbank Centre, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to Anthony Daniels' My Life as C-3PO. Without any further ado, please have a wonderful evening and enjoy the event.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Brian Herring, a name that is synonymous with the word who? Just a quick justification of me being here this evening. I do have a connection with Star Wars. Over the last 6 years, I've been fortunate enough to take part in all of the new Star Wars movies. I work with the creature department as a puppeteer, and you'll probably know my work because I'm the lead performer of BB-8. So that's me in the green suit running around in the desert. You thought it was all done with CGI, didn't you? Well, no. My connection with the galaxy far, far away goes back much further than that. Christmas 1977. My father took myself and my brother, I was then 7, to see the new film that everybody was talking about. And to say it blew my mind was a massive understatement. I was fanatical. I had the slippers, the pyjamas, the dressing gown, the bedspread, the curtains, and of course the toys. Star Wars really fueled my imagination. I wanted to know everything there was to know about these films. I was really, really interested. So interested, in fact, that I once had a school report come home that said Brian's obsession with Star Wars will lead him nowhere and he should concentrate on his academic studies. It's been 44 years since you first met George Lucas.
Yeah.
Why write a book now?
Somebody asked me to.
I'll do it.
But seriously, it's over the years I've written various little articles or whatever. Things like the Insider magazine. I used to write the Wonder column. Anybody read the Wonder column? Thank you so much, sir. I shall now address my entire speech to you. You had a chance, you know. Over the years I've been not a writer, but a wordsmith. Somebody can coin a sentence, if you will. And then, yes, the invitation came, and then it suddenly seemed, after all these years, to memorialize some of the good and some of the not so good stuff, so that people, fans, people who read books, people who like Star Wars, would get a different viewpoint, an insider's viewpoint, from a certain point of view. That was a very in remark for those people who know Obi-Wan Kenobi. For the rest of you, don't worry about it. I took the challenge, and it happened that I had time on my hands, whether it was on trains, on aeroplanes, at home in the freezing cold in France with no heating. I have suffered for my art. But what I wanted to do was put down what did, in the end, to my surprise, become a journey. And I didn't know that was going to happen until eventually I put all the pieces in order. What I've written is a series. I didn't even want to have chapters because chapter headings get in the way. And when you read the book, you'll see eventually I realized that people do need a slight tether, a bus stop, if you will. So I put chapter headings in, very, very monosyllabic. And then I realized that one of the things I enjoy in films, we all do, or in books, is a slight cliffhanger approach. So that I've written as though presaging some kind of doom or something. So it's not always linear. And sometimes you'll have to really work out what on earth is he talking about. Well, you're probably doing that right now, I know. What is he talking about? Because sometimes, in a very sort of ancient Roman way, the subject will actually come at the end of the paragraph, and you go, oh, that was it all along. You know, in a film, everything is edited because the director has aimed you, and the editor has aimed you at something. And I wanted you to have a slightly free-flowing approach to it. And it is, of course, structured I wrote in pieces, a bit of paper there with, and I always had to carry paper and a pen. I think George always did that, yeah? And I would make notes about this and say, yes, I should do that, notes over here. And of course, the trouble is you can never find them. I mean, they're all somewhere else. But then I realized that I needed to put it on a structure. And the structure was, of course, the movies.
And was there anything you used specifically to jog your memory? Did you go through anything or watch the movies back?
Yeah, I'm not a great archivist. So, yes, I did go in the attic and find all these storage boxes that were randomly just stashed with stuff, you know. And some things I didn't know I had. You know, there's ADR scripts from the early movies. You know, there's the first script there, which is not really like the film you eventually saw.
Real collector's items, some of them.
So they say. And it is fascinating to see that cover. It says, The Star Wars, because it was the first draft they gave me. They changed the name later. So, yeah, I was surprised at some of the stuff, and then mad that other things that I vaguely remembered I couldn't find. So anybody out there who has memories, please archive them, because you never know. They may ask you to write a book. Yes, be warned.
Well, I've read your book, and it's a riveting read. I really, really enjoyed it.
So I'm sorry, what?
I read your book.
No, the other bit.
It's a riveting read.
Thank you very much. I almost missed it.
I haven't sat down and read a book in ages, and I did it in 2 goes, and it's really, really good. It's a great read. One of the things that struck me early on is that your desire to be an actor, and that you always wanted to be an actor, but that wasn't necessarily the path you initially took. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think, yes, because I know you came from a family that understood theatre,
yes.
didn't you? Yeah. Whereas I came from a more, how would you say, standard background. My father was a scientist, and I was a disappointment. Because he would have loved me to go into that thing, you know, but he even built me a miniature laboratory where I don't know what I did, but it wasn't for me. And then all I ever wanted to do, and I talk about this in the book, the magic and the horror of having a calling, of having a vocation, the calling, the need to be an actor is quite a challenge. And really it came down to it that really life wasn't worth living if I couldn't be an actor. And I wasn't even sure what being an actor was about. Do you realize that? I just had this need, like tonight, I needed to get on the stage and show off. And I don't know if that's acting or what, but I cannot explain it because it's absolutely inherent in my system, or was. And so I was 24 before I had the courage to go to drama school.
Oh, wow. And who were your influences as actors? Or were there any heroes you had?
I'm not sure. I did grow up, of course, in the days of Laurence Olivier. Back then, television, of course, people will remember the BBC armchair theatre and things like that. And we did go to the theatre. And just gradually, I loved, how would you say, the magic of a set, of talking, communicating with a group of people.
You were very much theatre-based as an actor.
Yes, I was. Back then, you know, television was fairly limited. You know, in my childhood, we'd have one BBC, and that was it. Then came colour, and now you can't move for product.
Absolutely. So you hadn't even thought about doing films?
No, God, that would be too.
Something other people did, was it? Yeah. You go off. You meet George Lucas. You get this job.
I'm reading my words.
And then, how did you find C-3PO? I mean, as an actor, I've worked in some creature heads, and as a puppeteer, I'm constantly removed from things. But how did you manage to find that character completely encased? And I think I've said this to you before. It's amazing when you see these films. C-3PO runs the entire gamut of all kinds of emotions, and he never blinks. You managed to do something that's so difficult to actually make a character. You can see his expression change, although his face never changes. So what was it like trying to find that? What was the rehearsal period for it like? What was the process?
The what?
The rehearsal period. You know, all those rehearsals you get on films.
Oh, yeah.
What was that like? Could you expand on that for us?
I mean, where can I begin? We started making the costume. Obviously, they started. These wonderful, first of all, Liz Moore, the sculptor, she made a statue of my body, so we took a plaster cast, not something I recommend. But then we ended up...
Yeah, it's crazy.
Then we ended up with this statue, and then she created the shape that we came to know, but then they had to make it in various pieces.
So they made a prototype suit first, did they?
They made all sorts of prototypes. And here you can see where we're going with this. I keep saying we, where they were going. They were the craftsmen. And as you can see, it's not totally complete, but you can see almost it's getting there.
So how many pieces was that suit in?
Well, eventually, 17.
And you?
18.
So did the movement, did the suit inform the movement, or was it the other way around? Did that suit tell you how you were going to walk in it?
Well, half and half. First of all, I mean, it is rigid. This was in two halves to begin with, so it moved-ish. But I realized quite quickly that one of the things about a character is how it walks. You know this. With me, I had to really, and there was no rehearsal. They promised there'd be rehearsal. But I had no rehearsal. So back in the desert, I was really working out, and believe me, to begin with, it was absolutely scary. And then I worked out something that 3PO's slightly kind of prissy personality, slightly very correct, almost Asian sort of quality. If you approach somebody, in a sort of, because I was top heavy, the costume weighed a ton, and I'm kind of working out how to do it. And then I realized, if you're very heavy on the top, you kind of go sort of almost Frankenstein, because this force is now moving over that side. That's not 3PO's character, is it? But if he sort of takes gentler steps, then he really looks quite nice, doesn't he? Non-threatening. So that was one of the things I had to do. Mm-hmm. And then the other one, which really was an issue for me, was that we as people use our hands and our faces and our head in all sorts of ways that magnify our expression, if you will. And I didn't have it. That was as near as my hand would come to my face. And that took away an awful lot of expressive capability. So I had to learn how to use, as you will, as a puppeteer, because basically we're doing the same job, Absolutely. You and me, is to use what you have got, which is the middle, which is a tremendous source of, I would say, energy or lack of energy. If you get sick, it sort of is starting here. If you're sad, it sort of starts here. But you're absolutely right about the eyes. And one of the captivating things about Lismore's sculpture is those big, round eyes that are so soulful or can be so expressive. And a bit of me doesn't know how it works.
So you speak a lot in the book about the making of the initial movie. And then, of course, that movie is released. And so that was a big party and everyone was having a great time, right?
Yes, they were. Sadly, I wasn't invited. It wasn't a great time. They, as you'll read, they wanted, and people believed them, that C-3PO was a real robot. So they didn't kind of want me around, because I might have given the game away. So I watched all this from a distance. Can you believe that? That I watched around the world, the press coming in and seeing all this hoopla about this movie that I was in, but suddenly I wasn't in. That was a difficult time.
With that in mind, then, why did you do The Empire Strikes Back?
It was a job.
Fair enough.
No, seriously, it was a job. I'm an actor. I need the money. You're kidding. And that's true. It's a fact. But also something curious had happened. I realized that I actually really liked 3PO to the extent I wanted to look after him. I almost became his keeper in my mind. Nobody, it was my feelings, not nobody else's. So, yes, I said, yes. That's where things began to change.
Okay. And then it all went quiet for about, until about 20-odd years ago when they decided to do 3 more.
That's right, and that really came out of the blue. I thought it was all over. I said bye-bye to the first trilogy, which was 6, what was it? 1, 2, 3. It was 4, 5, and 6.
4, 5, and 6,
yeah. Your school reports were right, weren't
they?
They
were,
You're just crap, yeah. And then, I got this call to go to... Everything for an actor changes with a telephone call. And here was me listening to George talking about episode 1, so the prequels.
And were they a very different experience to the original trilogy?
Yeah, because the world... you have to realise in the interim, something really magical had happened, which was the growth of green screen animation and the growth of industrial light and magic. And the reason for that was that film about the dinosaurs. What was it?
Jurassic something or other, yes.
Yeah, it's another film. It's not one of ours. No. Jurassic Park was breakthrough in entertainment. And from there was the great jump off. But because green screen was the new thing on the block, people kind of got into it a bit heavily, I think.
We even felt that within the puppetry industry because everything was going digital. So there were fewer and fewer...
Going digital.
So there were fewer and fewer practical effects.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we hit the sequel trilogy. And they decided they wanted to do everything in the old ways again. So back came practical effects.
Yes.
And along came J.J. Abrams.
Along came J.J. Crazy person. J.J. was 10 when he saw the original Star Wars, and he remains, some 30 years later, 40, he's older than I think, isn't he? 40 years later, he's still that 10-year-old. You know this.
Absolutely.
You've seen him on the set. He's
Absolutely.
like bubbling with enthusiasm. It's magic.
He's the heir apparent, isn't he?
Yes. But he loves real scenery. And I love real scenery. If you think about it, you don't need scenery, really. But it's magic for the actors, isn't it? Because I was always going out and poking things to see what they were really made of. And I didn't destroy anything. But it is magic. And you don't have to act the sense of the scene because you're in there, in rooms as big as this with towering scenery above you. And it's just a treat on a daily basis.
I mean, was it strange to go back onto the Millennium Falcon after all those years? Because it is a set that makes grown men cry. Having been on it and messed around on it quite a bit, it is quite something to behold.
It is true, but in the cockpit, I was just at Galaxy's Edge in California, where you get to Disneyland, where you get to fly the Millennium Falcon. And the screens are all live and you're shooting at things and all that kind of thing. At the studio, it's not like that, is it?
No, it's not.
You are just sitting there pretending, and there's a bunch of people staring at you because they're bored as heck, and you're going, but nothing's happening. It's all done in post. So if you want a real treat, go to Galaxy's Edge.
But was it strange to come back into that situation with those actors and in that scenario?
It wasn't strange to come back as 3PO because of all the things I'd been doing, voiceovers and things like the wonderful Yoda Chronicles, made out of Lego. Absolutely love Lego. And they were a great partner, in a way, with Star Wars. They've gone together into the future and obviously now branched out to other films. We don't talk about that. It was magic to come back. And then, of course, there is Carrie. And Harrison, and it all began to feel, because the prequels were very different. I mean, different cast, different storyline, different atmosphere, as you can read. And then suddenly, it's almost like coming back home, in a way, because there was Carrie. Both of us older, but both of us still the same.
And of course, a whole new generation of new Star Wars characters, be it Rey or Finn and Poe.
Is this your build-up to your character?
Is it my go?
And
then the little round rolling robot, yes.
And I was always worried that other robots were going to upstage me. You mean they did? You mean BB-8's funnier than me?
Well, it's interesting because what we were talking about earlier with you managing to act that character, perform that character without your face, it's very similar with BB-8, and it's very much, you have to find the attitude and the humanity in these things, or the canine in this particular case, with an inanimate object. Yes. And that, I think, has been the key to C-3PO's performance all the way through, because when we were developing BB-8's character, we were told to kind of maybe keep it a little bit more robotic, and then I pointed out that C-3PO double takes. And nobody would program a robot to do that, because the one thing about Star Wars is they have the most human robots. Because you've got a butler, and R2-D2 is fundamentally a foul-mouthed plumber.
It's true. It's absolutely true. But here was the big difference. That not only am I seeing this ball at the beginning, and of course you were there.
Yes.
And you can read what I call him in the book on the set. And then eventually we do scenes together. And here is an extraordinary breakthrough, because many of you will know that R2-D2 is totally silent on the set. You know, he's about that big. And I would talk to it, you know. Where are you going? Nothing. Well, what makes you think that a settlement's over there? Nothing. Well, go that way then. You'll be malfunctioning within a day, you near-sighted scrap pile. Nothing. And it was very difficult. I had to get into the, can I use the word art?
Yeah, go on.
Into the art of pretending. Because eventually I wrote out what I assumed were his lines. Because you can't just wait for your cue. Where are you going? Oh, you have to imagine what he's saying. Go, what? You know, you have to react. So I had to write the lines out. Nobody warned me that R2 wasn't going to speak. And then, of course, time moves on. I'm on the set. We're now in another set. And there is BB-8 for real. And then here is Brian. And he... Could you give us your BB-8?
Well, you've got to ask it a question. You ask it a question.
Okay. BB-8, what are you doing here? That made such a difference to me. Suddenly, I had a friend. I was talking with somebody. It was all happening. The only problem was, I mean, look at this face. Look. The only problem was the ball was down here and Brian's here. So do that again. And action. BB, no,
sorry, I'm sorry. Okay. Line.
Okay. BB-8, what are you doing here? Do you see the problem? I started looking at him, and I'm meant to be talking to the ball down here.
Now, you had a different job, as I recall, on The Last Jedi. You were drafted in.
Yes.
To,
Yes. I wasn't very much involved. Well, I certainly wasn't in this scene. It was again on. It was on the 007 stage, which is the biggest stage in Europe. It's enormous, and it's where all the James Bond films are made. And they came to me and said, "You're not in the scene, but we would love you to do a mime class or an acting class with 5 waiter droids." And I talk about it. And here is an example. Terrifying with the glasses of champagne, read about it. But what was magic for me was that after all these years of being looked after by so many different teams over the years, starting with Phil McDonald, Maxie, and so on, and ending up with Joe and Sophie, that suddenly I was given the chance, curiously, to pay back, to know what to do for somebody in a terrible suit that needed looking after, almost like a baby, somebody unable to care for themselves. And I got immense pleasure from this practical. The only thing was, 007 stage is enormous, so if the camera's up this end and you're watching and they cut, you then have to run, 300 yards down there to sort things out, run back again. It was quite a workout.
And did these guys have the use of their fingers?
It was only in the last film, the one we're just doing, that I had fingers. They did have fingers, but actually what you can't see there, and please don't spoil the surprise. He's holding the tray like that, very securely, because he got Velcroed fingers, and he was stuck to the tray. He had to go home in those fingers, I tell you. It's quite a dramatic moment in the book.
Now, that was The Last Jedi, and of course, we have not long finished on The Rise of Skywalker, which will...
It isn't finished.
I'm saying nothing on that one. What's wrong with you? They're watching.
I was in Washington on Friday in America, and as always, my phone rings.
So much trouble.
And it's Jay. All I will say is the director on the phone saying, "Could you just do this?" So it isn't over. Look, he's like a naughty schoolboy, all right, JJ, because he will fiddle with this film right until the last minute.
Absolutely.
I will say that in some ways I stopped learning the big scripts because it would change that night, and then it would change the moment you arrived in your trailer in the morning, and then it would change on the set, and then the script would be slightly the same but slightly different, so my brain is like really fractured on this. But it is still in the making, because believe me, JJ is making a film that has pleased me so much, and I think it's pleased you too, because the saga is coming to an end, and it's coming to the end in a very fine way that I think will satisfy everybody. But I'm not here as an advertiser for the film. I'm here because I've written a book. Now, silly sod.
Have you any thoughts about the fact this saga is now coming to an end and that we may not see C-3PO?
I love it, yeah.
See what I did there?
Very
That's
good.
good.
You worked that in.
Yeah, totally. That we may not see 3PO after this.
I had very good thoughts about it because the story needed to come to an end.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it could have trailed on forever. Like, I mean, even what's that other program? Game of Thrones. Yeah, that seems to have gone on forever, but even that's ended.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, in respect almost to the George Lucas's original plan, it had a beginning. All right, the beginning was here. I don't understand. But now the end is here. And the end is fine. It's a good end. And I feel okay about it because, well, partly 3PO has a good time, partly the story is very good, and partly maybe it is time to stop. However, don't think it's over for 3PO. I know there are other projects, at least vocally, that I'm sure they will come to me, and I'm very good about that. I will admit that the last day on the set was difficult. Yeah, it was natural, I think, that I felt a bit, but there we are.
I will just ask you very quickly, had that suit changed very much between the 70s and now?
Yes, when JJ asked me if I'd be in his film, what was I going to say? I said, he said, would you just like to do the voice? And I said, no. He said, quite right. But I would, I said, like a new suit. He said, quite right. That's the way JJ talks, brilliant. And they 3D printed it, which meant you could change things in the CAD computers and all that kind of thing. And bits of it worked to my advantage so well. The face, the head that used to take half an hour, lining up screws here and here, half an hour, which meant they didn't want to take it off because it would be half an hour to put back on again. And studio time is very expensive. Now it is... Did you like that?
I did. It's very good. Do it again.
Oh, I can't remember. Never doing this again.
I did, whilst I was actually researching this, I did speak to...
You've researched
I
this?
did. I know, I've written things on cards. It's great. Dave Merriweather, who...
Dave Merriweather is in creature effects, I think, and he is a genius of making things out of plastic and electronics and he's adorable. He came to me with the exploded version on the computer, and I could see all the bits that he was making. And he was making them from photographs and memories, because he wasn't allowed to touch the thing in the archives.
No.
Which is like, So do you know him?
I do. And I spoke to him this week, and he said when he was on the job before he took The Force Awakens, and someone said to him, what's the best job you've ever had? And he said, the one I'm about to do next. Because he was so excited.
And it was me.
And it was you. and it was you.
Oh, delightfully. And he, seriously, the fact that it will go on and off in 2 or 3 seconds ish means that after each shot, they can just take it off, wipe my face, and breathe again and put it on at the last minute. I cannot tell you the difference because, going right back to the beginning, I wore that suit for about 7 hours in the desert without taking anything off. And again, it's there to read about. And that became a kind of torture in a way. And now with this transition. And this is why the story in the book it's one of the examples of why this journey ends on a bit of a high.
Yeah, because it took several hours to get you into it the first.
Yeah,
moment,
it took over 2 hours, and I'd had enough, but we hadn't even started shooting, and I wanted out of this. But we were in the middle of the desert, there were no taxis, I couldn't leave, you know.
But they got it down to how long in the new ones?
Well, on a good day, it's about 5 minutes.
There you go.
Well, I've got this great team, Sophie and Joe, who, and you know, it's all laid out a bit like an IKEA thing. You know, and you just have to check there's nothing left on the table at the end.
So, has writing this book been therapeutic for you?
Yes, and I will admit that some passages were quite hard to write and put me in a bit of a mood for a couple of weeks or whatever. And then I would find things were really quite joyous and quite silly and quite funny and quite lovely and quite touching. And I hope if people read it, they will see a balance in the force, in the book, that, yes, it was therapeutic in many ways, and I'm quite glad about that.
There is a definite journey in the book because, as I said, I have read it. And it's...
You got a free copy, that's why.
There is
you
that.
didn't mean to buy
but
it.
there's definitely... Again, as you discussed tonight, you were quite down on the original film, but then your treatment therein. But then by the time you get to the end, you seem to be having an absolute blast. Yeah. And it's interesting because it's not really it's not just for hardcore Star Wars fans. This book, it's quite an interesting. I've found it as a very interesting autobiography because C-3PO has been the big part in your life, and it's interesting the relationship you've almost had with that character through that book. And I think if you suddenly find this, if you give this to a Star Wars fan in your life, and you then find yourself reading it,
it does make a great Christmas present.
And after they've read it, like 2 days later, pick it up and have a look at it because it's a really, really fascinating read. I've got one more question,
but it isn't. It really isn't just for Star Wars fans.
No,
because I've had a journey just as many of you have, and we all live in different circumstances. But I can see why they changed the title on me, because we know it's not my title, don't we?
Well, I do. They don't.
Have we mentioned this?
No, we haven't.
And you see, I had when I came up with it, I wrote all sorts of things, man in the golden mask, inside the mask, behind the mask, all the things about masks. And then I came up with telling the odds. Thank you so much. Because 3PO has been bullied, intimidated, I think you said when you came on, as I was waiting quite a long time in the wings to come on myself. Would it ever end? 3PO has been put down, pushed around, ignored, all these kind of things. And finally, I felt I had the chance to let him say, in reference to Han Solo's famous line, telling the odds, like sod it, for once, I'm actually going to tell the truth.
I think they should have called that book Shut Him Up or Shut Him Down. Ladies and gentlemen, the irrepressible Anthony Daniels.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode. Make sure you subscribe to the Southbank Centre Books podcast in all the usual places.
For more information about upcoming events, go to southbankcentre.co.uk or look us up on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram.